Okay, I'm going to explain matrix repatterning. So our purpose here is to locate sources of injury. And what we know about the body is that it has electrical properties. So people have electroencephalograms or electrocardiograms. We know the body produces electricity. And we also know through studies that many of these the electrical potential is also stored in the bones. The bones are electrical generators. And what we find is that many of the injuries that we have with falls or significant strains, the strain is absorbed into the deeper, denser structures. So I'm just going to give you an example here. So if you have an injury in one part of your body, we know that the cells are interconnected. And so every injury creates a source of restriction. That restriction is going to be transmitted to the entire body and create a strain that can cause symptoms in different places. So when I'm pulling your sweater now, can you feel where the restriction is? Okay, you can feel it up in here or over here, but the source of it is here. So a lot of times the symptoms are going to appear in areas other than where the original injury was. In fact, after a period of time, this injury may subside. You may not even notice that it's sensitive anymore after maybe a few days or a few weeks. Okay? So in order to locate those injuries, we're going to use the fact that there are changes in electrical potential. So with an injury, the inside of your cells look like this sort of toy, which has protein, filaments, and tubules that actually creates shape to your cells. Normally it's very flexible, but when it's injured, it actually absorbs the energy of the injury and becomes strained, and that actually changes its ability to conduct electricity. All right? So what happens is, instead of being a conductor of electricity, your body resists the electricity, and you reduce the amount of current going through your body. And that's something we can actually detect. So this instrument creates an electrical signal which, when we place it over an area of the body that's injured, is going to reduce that local area of resistance to allow it to relax slightly. And as I said before, because the cells are interconnected, it's going to actually reduce that source of tension, and the whole body is going to relax, and we'll be able to feel that as a change in resistance. So as I test your resistance, I'm going to place it over different areas, and we'll be able to pick up areas of injury because of a change in resistance. So for example, right here in your hip, if I place this over your hip, you can see your ribs are more flexible. If I take it away from there, you can see that your ribs tighten up again. Okay? Now, because we know that this area is injured, it may affect your hip or low back, right? But you may not realize that your hip is actually the source of that injury. In addition, there are parts of the body, so bone is actually a very common source of injury. If you fall on your knees, or you bump your shin, or you fall on your hip or shoulder, those bones are very dense and they will absorb the injury and change the cell structure. In addition, you also have a large area within the center of your body which contains internal organs, and these are fluid-filled structures. So if you know anything about a water balloon, these are like water balloons, and this little model here demonstrates what happens to your organs when they're injured. Normally they're very flexible, but with injury, just like a water balloon, when it has an impact, that water balloon will expand because the water inside can only move outwards. It's a very dense substance. It's called non-compressible. And it expands and it transfers injury to all of the structures around it. So your ribs, your spine, if you have a head injury, it'll transfer into the bone structure. This is what we call a concussion, okay? But we really have a concussion that can happen anywhere in the trunk as well due to the fluid content of the organs. So, for example, you have a little bit of an injury right here, which you may not be aware of, okay? But how it affects you is you may have restriction in another part of the body, okay? So for example, if you notice your hip movement here, that's as far as I can go, and this rotation only goes about this far. Now because the muscles from this area connect down into the hip, if I place this over this area, that's going to temporarily neutralize this injury. And if I take your hip now and test the amount of movement you have now, just notice how flexible your hip is now. Okay, that's because I'm neutralizing this injury. Okay, and now the rotation that you have in your hip is much more flexible. All right. Okay, so what this tells us is that this is also a source of injury that's affecting different parts of your body. Now, the goal with treatment is to reduce the mechanical stress in these areas of injury, and we do that by using very gentle pressure. So the pressure is applied, depending on where it is, using our hands, and this allows the structures that are injured to actually come into alignment to allow the electrical current to begin to flow. And once that happens, then the electrical potential is restored. And so, for example, if I apply a little bit of pressure right in here, I'll just do a temporary little release in here. And this is going to release some of the tension in the rib cage that is creating this source of tension in your body. And just a little bit of time, the electrical current will begin to flow, and you'll notice that this starts to relax a little bit. Okay? This is not going to be a complete treatment, but it'll give you an idea of what can happen when that's released. So now if you notice, your hip is much, much more flexible. Correct?
Yes.
Good. All right. Good. All right, so that's the purpose of matrix repatterning. Our goal is to locate all the sources of injury that you may have acquired over a lifetime, and layer by layer release those with very gentle pressure, and once they're restored, essentially that will allow you to restore your flexibility, reduce pain, restore some of the joint stability, and normalize the joint structures, and basically be pain-free.